Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jacob Restituto, and I'm a musician from Northport, New York. And today I have a very exciting guest to chat with me. We have LeAnn Phelan from Creative Music Therapy and many other things. LeAnn has done many things in the music industry. You've worn many hats, and you've a lot of experience in a lot of different things. I read, and you mentioned prior to us getting started, that you have over 25 years of experience inside the music industry. Everything from A&R to background singing, on tour, to being at Sony Records A&R, to management, and also being a preliminary judge in American Idol. Now to having LP Creative Therapy. It is a pleasure to have you on the channel. Thank you so much for joining me.
Wow, that was really good. That was such a mouthful. Thank you so much, Jacob.
You know what? Let me be honest with you. I have done a lot of interviews and even before I've done these interviews, I used to have a show called Drinking with Jacob, where I'd have uh, um, I guess the word would be professionals on the channel. Like they would be like different professionals, whether it be a landscaper, whether it be a chiropractor, whether it be a fitness trainer, and I would just
Right.
ask them questions about their industry while we taste tested different drinks, right? And the hardest part of every interview was the intro, trying to say what they were. So it's
Oh,
been the biggest stress, but it's also been I've had a lot of practice, so I appreciate that.
yeah, no, it was really good. And
Thank you.
and having done a lot of speaking myself, that part usually gets pretty mangled.
Yeah,
And so you learn as a speaker to it's a little trick like this. It's like, thank you, Jacob, so much for having me. So, as you heard in the intro, I'm LeAnn Phelan, and I'm a music executive for 25 years. And I've been in publishing and A&R and Sony Records and co-head of ASIC. You learn to like go back over that stuff to
yeah,
kind of iron
cohesive.
it
Yeah.
out. But you did a really good job, so I don't feel like I really need to go into
Well,
that.
we're gonna go through it anyway because I want to hear a little. We're gonna talk about your backstory, and but
No.
first of all, I do want to say thank you very much for taking the time to come on the channel. I think it's gonna be a really cool conversation for anybody inside the music industry. I think you're gonna have a lot of insight for.
Thanks so much. I have really leaned into doing these kind of things in the last 2 years, and I love things like this. Like you DM'd me, and I just said yes, and that's so fun to think that you can connect with people all around the world, which I've been doing in my
Yeah.
workshops. But yeah, so the backstory is. That has changed for me. Not my story hasn't changed, but the way that I'm appreciating different parts of my
Hmm.
story has changed.
Yeah, that's a really interesting insight. Yeah.
Yeah, because when I first moved over into the business side, I didn't want to talk about being a singer because for some reason I thought that would kind of demote me in a way as an executive. And now I see it's the reason that I've been successful on the business side.
Very interesting.
Yeah, but just to back up, so yes, I've been on the business side for 25 years, but I didn't start on the business side. And I won't bore you too long, but the way that it started was when I was 9 years old. I was pretty shy, and my mom put me in voice lessons, which was so unusual because I wasn't singing, and no one in my family is musical. So she really just did that because, and I asked my mom about it not too long ago, and she told me she had gotten calls from my teachers, just to see if everything was going okay with me. But so she put me in voice lessons, and I instantly connected with music, and I still was like practicing by myself, in the
Hmm.
basement, not like any more or less shy. But about 2 years into it, I was at a rehearsal for our summer show, and we're about to go on stage. It's just like a normal rehearsal, but just for my voice teacher.
Hmm.
And I realized the other two sopranos in my group weren't there, and I was going to have to walk out for the first time and be the one in front of the microphone. And it was happening fast enough that I didn't have time to like completely freak out. So I just went out and did it. But what happened after that is my voice teacher stopped the run through, And he said, "LeAnn, Phelan, I heard every note to the soprano part." And then the music started back up. And I just floated off stage, just thinking about, oh my gosh, I just got encouragement for this, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when it changed for me, for music to become like a real thing.
Wow.
And I was like 11, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'll just get to the point. Like by the time I was 21, I was on the biggest pop world tour of the summer, singing background for Steve Winwood, who, if you don't know who Steve Winwood is, you guys need to go look him up because he's amazing. And he was in so many very important bands in music, and just himself as an artist. Um, so that Shaka Khan feature on Higher Love, like that was my part on the road. Like I
Oh
was
wow.
the only background singer, and this little girl who couldn't sing was singing that. So I've realized lately that that whole experience helps me with songwriters and with artists, because you couldn't start at a lower point than me. I had never sung before, and I was able to do that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think anything is possible. Um, you
You
know,
had
you yeah.
Yeah, you had mentioned something. I don't know if it was prior to us recording or during the recording, but you had mentioned that you help singers and songwriters. Actually, you might have used the word songwriters, but on like the songwriting journey. But it's interesting how you're talking about the singer's journey, and it's just kind of cool to see like, yeah, you can like for example, I just started taking vocal lessons like pretty like regularly a couple months ago. And
Mhm.
yeah, she's teaching me technique, but it's a lot of mental stuff actually. Like I was joking with my wife, and it's so funny. I'm about to use this word. I was joking with my wife. I'm like, I feel like I'm going to a therapy session every time I'm going to my vocal lesson because it's so many mental
Yeah.
things and things inside of like outside of the actual just like, hey, you gotta breathe from your lower parts, and you gotta like it's not that as much as it is in your mind and the journey of a songwriter and the journey of a singer. And it's just very interesting that you mentioned that. It just kind of clicked for me.
Well, I think all of it is tied together. I don't,
Sure.
you know, if you're a painter or a novelist or whatever you're creating, there's a journey to it. And so I can take even, you know, the journey of a product
Yeah.
and make the similarities to the entrepreneurial journey of a
Sure.
songwriter.
Yeah.
And it is a lot of mindset. And honestly, that's that I was on a session like this, just a private session with a songwriter, because in 2020, I put out a flyer in April during the lockdown, and I just said, let's keep your creative momentum going. I'll meet with you for free in April, because I had done a lot of that. I co-headed ASCAP at one time and met with songwriters all along, and I got all these people that wanted to meet. And then so I went into May doing these sessions, and somebody on the session said, wow, this feels like therapy. So
Ah.
I created the business LP Creative Therapy.
Oh,
And
that's
you're
really interesting. I was
yeah,
curious how that name tied together. That's
yeah, and
very interesting.
you're right on it. Like it is, you you have to be able to persevere
Yeah.
through the
Yeah.
journey. And even people that look like overnight successes, it's never the story.
100%.
You know, so just recently I've created this thing that I've been teaching people. And um, you know, I think maybe hit songwriters who I also meet with hit songwriters, they may be a little more like, yeah, I know that, which I haven't really tried it out in front of them, but I feel like this journey is helpful because you can look at it as a writer, and if you're struggling at some point, if you could hear from someone like me who's published, managed, and just helped hundreds of people, met with hundreds of songwriters, you know, And I've done over 70 workshops in the last 2 years, and just having different guests on. And if
Sure.
you could know as a songwriter, like, wow, everybody's been through this journey. Like the details are different, but the stepping stones are very similar.
Yeah.
And I think it's very helpful to see that, just to know, like, wow, if I can just push through here, I can make it to this next point.
Could you give a brief overview of some of the general stepping stones that you're mentioning?
Yeah, I'll give a brief interview. Now, there's more to it than this,
Sure, sure,
but
sure.
I will call this, the 5 C's of your creative journey.
Okay, there you go.
And
That's
yeah,
catchy. I like that.
there's more to it, but to briefly run through them, I think this starts out with curiosity. Um, me as a singer, getting put into voice lessons and connecting with it, and I'm curious about music. I start
Yeah.
listening and learning and that kind of thing. So you start out with the curiosity, like, wow, what are these chords on the guitar or
Mm.
whatever. um, and so you're playing around with that, and then something kind of flips in there. For me, it was that encouragement that I got, but somewhere in there, that curiosity turns into a commitment.
Very interesting.
And 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 it, I think to really be successful, that commitment has to border on obsession. Where you're just
Yeah.
like, give me all of it, I want to learn all of it, I want to stay in my room for 8 hours and practice or whatever. So it turns into a commitment. Then you've got to throw a little courage in there, because you've
Wow.
got to start showing people what you're doing, singing in front of people, or playing a song for people, or whatever. And that,
Yeah.
brings all these other elements into it. Like, how are you going to handle the rejection and
Sure.
all that? And are you going to know that, like, maybe your mom and your big sister are going to tell you it's great when it's really not? Like, are you going to, keep kind of going through that stage? And then it is my belief that if you take that courage and you are courageous enough to add your vulnerability in with that, like really say something vulnerable with your music, or express something with your voice or whatever, then you get to this really big C called connection. I don't think you get to connection without exposing yourself in some way, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Um, and it's funny, like I'll just share this with you. I was just talking with a friend of mine who's a really successful songwriter on the sync side. And I send out this newsletter every so often, maybe one a month. And I wrote this piece about a mirror that I had that broke. And I was going to throw it away, and then I didn't. And now, like, it's fixed and repaired. It's so beautiful. And it was just kind of about realizing that the imperfections make it more valuable to
Sure.
me, you know. But really, I really had a short story about this mirror because it broke twice, and I had two huge heartbreaks in my life. And I was writing about that, really, but I didn't share that in my newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was talking to my songwriter friend about how I was scared to, like, really lean into
Mm-hmm.
it. And while what I wrote was a nice little piece, but probably the bigger piece would have connected more,
Mm-hmm.
so that's a really tough thing to throw that vulnerability on the fire. But that's where you get to connection. And then when you get to connection, you then start having people like me go, oh my gosh, I think I want to manage this person. Like, that's when your champions, the fifth
Wow.
C, come along.
That is super fascinating. So, if I
Yeah.
could reiterate them, you have curiosity, then it's commitment, then it's courage, then it's connection, and then it's champions. That is really, really fascinating. And of course, there's many facets to each of those five pillars, and you said there's many other things
Yes.
involved.
Yeah.
But that is a really interesting journey, and I think that it's also kind of telling if you kind of like self reflect, like even myself as a musician and songwriter, to be like,
Hmm.
where are you on this journey, and trying to
Where
figure
are
out
you?
and how can I get to the next step is a great question. I have a super interesting question for you about songwriting, and you mentioned songwriting a lot in this creative journey. Actually, I'm curious. You mentioned the vulnerability. Myself, I noticed that I can be very extreme. So when I hear, "Oh, you got to be vulnerable," I'm like, how vulnerable do like where is that? Have you seen that line of like, okay, you tell everything? Do you tell does is success determined by how vulnerable you are or no? Like I'm curious about that. Have you noticed anything in your journey?
Well, I don't think that vulnerability has to always be where you're I did use the word exposing, but I don't think it's always like this really big fearful thing. Like I would submit to you that um, Megan Trainor and Kevin Kadish were really vulnerable writing all about that bass.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like they had fun with it, but like there were some very specific vulnerable things in there, just saying like, hey,
Yeah,
I'm like body image things and that kind of thing. But it was very fun and playful. But do you know what I mean? Like
it might not always
vulnerability,
be this deep, huge thing kind of thing.
right?
It's
It's
just
it's not
speaking your
always,
truth.
yeah. I don't
Very
think
interesting.
I just think I think vulnerability is just anything that's at a deeper level. And that could just be listening to your audience or just sharing something that's just not a typical like, oh, it's a storm's coming. Yeah, I heard that it's cold outside. Like we had a very surface
Oh,
level
very
conversation,
interesting. I see what
when
you're
we
saying.
started. Yeah, but you just there are a
Mm-hmm.
few
Yes.
questions that you can ask to get to a deeper level. Like
Yeah.
I feel like we're already there now. Like I just told you, hey, I didn't share the bigger story of
Yeah.
what I put out to the world. So it is harder
That
to
is very
do.
interesting. Because right there you
Yeah,
mentioned something vulnerable, but you're not like saying your whole, life story, or I don't know everything about
right,
it. That is interesting because I've always been trying to
right.
figure out that line of, well, where is it? Do they tell my whole life story? Will I share this parts of my life? That is, and I think that'll help a
Yeah,
lot of songwriters as well because we all hear, oh, you gotta,
yeah,
gotta be vulnerable, gotta put yourself out there. But I'm like, well, what am I putting out? Like, how do I even write about song about some of these things? But that's a great
yeah.
insight. That is a good insight.
But it always draws people in because my my client that I manage, his name is Evan Klein, and he's a pop artist, producer, songwriter. And we met over Zoom like this in
Hmm.
about 2 years ago. And we instantly connected. Um, and then a couple of weeks later, Evan sent me a song. I had left the door open, like, yeah, send me music. He sent me this song, and this was like the height of the pandemic, and I'm sure I was like watching Netflix, and I took a break and looked at my phone and just clicked on the MP3, and he had sent me a song that he wrote, produced, was singing, and it was his life story.
Hmm.
And so it's very specific to him.
Hmm.
But I heard that one song and I was like, oh my gosh, I
Hmm.
have to manage this person
Hmm.
off of one song
Hmm.
because he was so vulnerable in that. And I just think about writing songs and thinking about being in the room and maybe somebody throwing out such a specific line
Sure.
and how somebody else might be like, that's that, not everybody's going to connect to that. But really what happens is you say that specific thing and it hits on that emotion that's universal. That's what he did in the song. And the song, we'll
Very
we'll
interesting.
release it. Yeah, we'll release it later this year. So I'll tell you more about it then.
Yeah.
But like the one song, like totally
Yeah.
pulled me in. But okay, here's a lighter example of that. I mean, I guess this would fall under vulnerability, or maybe it would just fall under, wow, that's a great line. But I'm really dear friends with a songwriter named J.T. Harding, and I wish I had his book here. He just wrote a book too called "Party Like a Rock Star," which is a great autobiography of the journey of a songwriter. But JT's a co-writer on "Smile," the Uncle Cracker song "Smile."
Okay.
And we were talking about that line. Um, I think it's cooler than the flip side of my pillow in that song.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's an example of a line that I had never heard before, but everybody knows what that is.
Oh,
And how
very
specific is
interesting.
that, you
Yeah, yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah, for
And
sure.
so, yeah, I think we're, veering
Yeah.
off of the edge of vulnerability, but that's just another cool thing that we were having a
Relatability.
conversation about. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting because I
Yeah.
think, so many songwriters are trying to be the best version of what they're supposed to be or what they want to be.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's sometimes when we use these words or phrases, it's hard to be like, well, what does that even mean? Like being vulnerable or being relatable. But it's of course a journey.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but it is interesting to dissect some of the journey. I'm super curious, and I want to continue going into your new endeavors, like with the LP creative therapy, but also the creative management. But I'm curious, just uh, your head being being co-head, was it of ASCAP? Yeah, co-head of ASCAP.
Right. Yeah.
What does that mean? That's such an interesting. So this co-head of ASCAP in Nashville, correct?
Oh, right.
So
Yeah. In
I'm just
Nashville.
curious about what that means, and if you could just elaborate on that, because it's and
Well,
explain for people that don't know
yeah.
what ASCAP is. I mean, there's three major PROs, right? BMI, ASCAP, and CSAR.
Yeah. And just to tell you this, like looking back, I've been a 5 year person at
Yeah.
all these, like 5 years at Windswept Pacific, 5 years
Hmm.
at Combustion Music. Well, not 5 years at Sony Records, but I wanted to be 5 years at Sony Records, and then they merged. Then I did about 5 years with American Idol slash 19 Entertainment, which I worked on the show during the audition uh, months, and then I managed songwriters and
Oh,
producers.
cool, cool, cool.
So that was kind of a dual thing. And then I got asked to come to ASCAP. Um, and basically, when you're creative, or at least the way I approached it and the way people do in Nashville, like it's very interactive. Like you're kind of like, I said this in another interview for Billboard, but you're kind of like the Ellis Island of Music Row, like songwriters, welcome, come in. And so you really do sit down with everybody you can. And there are different levels in that. Like some people, there isn't, they aren't ready for you to really do more for them because they're just so much in the early stages. So that meeting becomes the thing like, hey, well, I hear your songs, give you some constructive feedback, and also let you know that, hey, this is just my opinion and this is your song.
Hmm.
And you can take what you will
Sure.
and leave the rest. But then there's another level of people that are like teetering on the edge of being ready for a publishing deal. Then there's another level of people who have publishing deals, but they still maybe want to come in and get connected, or maybe you
Hmm.
can put them in shows and do events and all this. Then they're like hit songwriters, then they're legendary songwriters. So you're basically working with all of those people and all of the publishers
Yeah.
who work with them. So having been a publisher and a writer manager, I feel like it just married both of those things. So I was working there, and my boss who hired me, the amazing Tim Dubois, he moved on, and then Mark Driscoll um, became my boss for another year or so, and then Mark moved on to run a publishing company. And so myself and a guy named Michael Martin just kind of moved up together. So we were co-heads of
Wow.
the whole creative side of ASCAP Nashville.
Wow.
And
It's a
really,
pretty cool title,
honestly,
honestly.
yeah, it was amazing. And like anything, when you one thing that happens in business when you move up the ladder is that sometimes, unfortunately, you get further away from the thing that you
Interesting.
actually excel
Mm-hmm.
in.
Mm-hmm.
And so with those responsibilities, there is less time for developing songwriters and creating
Mm-hmm.
these programs. And I want to add this because it ties into LP Creative Therapy. But when I looked back at my career and just kind of thought about the things I was most proud of, a lot of the groups and things that I put together at ASCAP were the things I was most proud of. I got this download, I call them divine downloads of an idea to help writers called, well, I knew what the plan was. I brought my friend Ryan in and we brainstormed the name together, GPS Project. So GPS stands for Guidance for Songwriters from Publishers.
Oh, cool.
So the plan was you
Wow.
get,
Couldn't get any
publishers.
better than that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So publishers didn't have time to just meet with random writers. So I got this idea that our job is to show them the best of what we see and get them to just meet with the best of what we see. And so I called, 12 publishers and said, would you commit to one 30-minute meeting a month? They all said yes. So then I would pair them up with these writers that our staff would put together. And I really just wanted to continue the development process. But what happened was about 30% of those writers got signed to their first deals.
Wow.
So then we did it again the next year and the next year. And I'm really proud that they still do that program
That's cool.
today at ASCAP. Another group that I had was this wasn't very creative, but we called our group the ASCAP Girls. And I put that together because females weren't represented in country. And the thing about the group was most everybody, I think everybody but one person had a publishing deal, and they were artists and songwriters. But the women in that group were Kelsey Ballerini, Carly Pierce, Hannah Dasher, who's on Sony Records now, Jillian Jacqueline, who got signed to Big Loud Records, Jordan Shellhart, who is an amazing songwriter. She has a record coming out on Warner Brothers.
Wow.
I'm trying to think who else was in that. They were all like
That's
amazing.
amazing.
So that kind of plays into like what I'm doing now with the
Sure.
groups, like just curating the needs of
Yeah.
the writers who show up.
Sure. That's super interesting. For those that are a little earlier in their career, could you break down some of the terms you had mentioned, for example, like publishing or publishing deal, if they're just starting out, like what that actually means, and or for somebody that's watching this that isn't in the industry, could you just give a little backstory on that?
Sure. When you're a songwriter, I mean, it's possible to go it alone. It's possible, but most people see a great benefit in getting signed to a publishing company. And what a publishing company does is they say, okay, Jacob, we, and this process takes a while, but we have heard some songs that you've written or co-written. We think they're really viable and commercial. We love who you're working with. We have met with you a couple times. You're such a cool guy. You're very driven, and we want to work with you. We want to give you an advance so that you can focus on writing, and we want to take your songs and help you develop as a songwriter, and hopefully take your songs and get them placed so that we all can monetize what you're doing, and we can
Sure.
all benefit from that. And there are different ways that publishing deals can look. And I'll just go ahead and plug what I mean. This is going to live on YouTube, but I have created a course with a Grammy nominated hit songwriter producer named Forrest Whitehead. And so Forrest and I came together. He's doing a lot of online courses in production, and he's got amazing tools out there that
Hmm.
people can learn from. But we came together and created a course called Pub Deal Prep.
Very
So
cool.
it's just what it sounds like. Like if you're going like, how do I get one of these publishing deals? What is a publishing deal? How does a publisher find me? We
Hmm.
address all of those things in the course because Forrest is coming at it from the songwriter producer side and like speaking to what his journey was. And I'm coming at it from the publisher manager side, having published or managed an ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC Writer of the Year, having people like Kings and LeAnn and Ashley Gorley and Jimmy Robbins and all of these people like
Hmm.
in my history. And so it's really kind of cool to like bring that
Yeah.
360 view of everything and answer a lot of people's questions. But if you're watching this, what is today? March 11th?
11th.
Yeah. We start a live 5 day, we call it the 5 day pub deal prep challenge on March 14th, 2022
Perfect.
to the 18th. And it's at 4 p.m. Central, every day. And there's a link on my Instagram,
Yeah, we'll
where
have
you can
those linked
sign
up,
up.
absolutely, and this will be published
Yeah.
before then, so perfect.
Yay.
Absolutely,
Oh,
and the links will
everybody's
be in.
welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that that's really cool. I really like the fact that um, we have similar goals and what a lot of the stuff that we're doing. And we meant I don't know if we mentioned this, like I said, in the actual recording and prior to, but it's really cool to see other people that you know. Your experience is tremendously more. You have much more experience than I do. But even in the little experience that I have, I want to share that with people that are starting off, or wherever they are in their
Yeah.
career. We all have our own experiences, and like I said, it's cool. There's enough information, success to go around, and somebody else having success doesn't take away from my success.
Oh my gosh. We just talked about this Monday in my LP Creative Therapy workshop. Topher Brown came on. He's also, hit songwriter, producer, lovely person. And he was saying that we were talking about that, and the quote, comparison is a thief of joy and all of that.
Preach, come on, absolutely,
Yeah, and he was just
absolutely.
saying, like, just remember, keep telling yourself that what's meant for you will be for you. And that was the most valuable thing I think he said during the workshop because it's, that's honestly, that's, I think, why we have a problem with, um, well, I don't want to go there, but social media can bring out, some really bad feelings for people.
Hmm.
I don't care who you are. You're going to
Yeah,
look at something else and your mind knows like, wait a minute, I'm good, but just that split second thing is like, oh,
absolutely.
so
It,
I'm
it is.
not worthy. I'm so
It is
behind.
so easy to go into that jealousy or why not me or comparison mentality. One
Yeah.
thing I've been trying to do instead of that is try to be like, well, hey, if that happened for him, why can't it happen for me, kind of thing. Like just using it as an inspirational thing rather than because
Right.
it's you're either gonna go one direction or the other. And I've been down that jealous road too many times. I'm like, I'm done with that. Forget that, man. Like, it's life's so much happier when you feel inspired by other people rather than jealous of other people.
I feel like the more I know, I in a way, I was just as smart when I didn't know anything because I was just going on my
Gut
gut,
feeling. Yep,
and
that's really
I
interesting.
just, yeah, I just want to, I've never said that before, but I just want to say to the people watching this, like, if I can figure out pre-internet from Trenton, Tennessee, if I can figure out how to get on a world tour, like you can figure it out. Like you got to follow those crumbs
Yeah.
and just the next step and the next step. And then, you don't,
What
you,
was that quote you just
yeah.
used? You'll end up where you're meant to be. What was? I'm sorry. What was that?
What's meant for you will be for you.
Exactly.
I think you said what's meant for you will end up in your hands.
Exactly.
What's
So
meant
you
for you.
follow the
Yeah.
crumbs like you just said, and you'll end up where you're
Yeah.
meant to be. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm super curious. So by the way, everybody go check out that link in her bio. I'll have the link down below as well. But go check that out if you are interested in that in that. Well, it was. Can you? I'm sorry. Can you repeat the name one more time? It was
Oh, Pub Deal Prep
Pub Deal
is
Prep. Yeah, it
it's what's
flows
coming
off the
out.
tongue.
Yeah, and I think that will be kind of an evergreen course.
Sure.
So that should be up forever. And then as
Cool.
far as like my personal workshops that I do outside of my stuff with Forrest, they just come about every so often. So my website is lpcreativetherapy.com, and you can like jump actually there's a great download on there, and just jump on my mailing list, and then you'll know when the workshops are coming
Perfect.
up. They're amazing. They're live. I bring in guests and
Yeah, I've seen
people
some of
get
the
to
guests that you've
meet,
had. It's
and
some pretty sweet names you have going on too.
it's pretty sweet. I'm
Yeah.
very proud of that. I haven't had the same guest twice, and I've done
Wow. Oh my
like
gosh, man.
70. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's actually an incredible statement right there. That
It's
is
really
really cool.
fun.
So I'm curious. You've done a lot in the songwriting aspect. You've done a lot in just the music industry in general. I'm curious what you've seen. Like working with ASCAP and these publishing deals and stuff. How do you define? I mean, this is such a subjective question, and but I'm curious. I like hearing everybody's different answer to this, and then kind of seeing where things line up between people's different answers. So, how do you define a great song?
Oh, how do I define a great song? I'm going to go with my split
Yeah,
second
please.
answer, because I was trying to like think about it, make sure I have this like really cool answer, but I feel something.
Okay, I like that.
I feel something. That's the first thing. And I love, like, because I am a singer in a prior life, I love beautiful words and melodies. Um, but but it's that combination of the lyric and the feeling of that lyric. And I can like say so many songs that come to mind, that make me feel that way. And not all of them are known in the world. Like my
Sure.
friend Erin Espy that I was talking to yesterday, I said, what happened with that song? It's Gonna Find You. It was from way back when I met him 10 years ago. And he co-wrote it with Busby, who passed away a few years ago, the producer Busby. And Aaron sent that song to me again, and I was just like blown
Mm-hmm.
away. Like again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like there's such a feeling in that song, and the lyrics are simple and beautiful. Um, I, especially since moving to Nashville, I just respect the lyrics so much. And I get really excited when I hear something that is said perfectly. I
Mm.
I heard Garth Brooks say this at a Hall of Fame induction. He said you he was describing the writer that was being inducted, and I'm blanking on who that was. I can't believe that, but he said you shouldn't be able to guess the next line of a song, but when you hear it, you should know it couldn't be anything else.
Uh-huh.
And that, I think, sums up the beauty, like in country music, especially, but in a lot of other songs too.
Yeah.
And my other thing about songs is that, you know, the songs, like a lot of times, songs of the year and things like that will be these kind of really emotional, um, on the more depressing side of things, you know.
Sure.
But I just submit to you that it's kind of like how comedic actors don't win the Oscar a lot of times. I think it's much harder to make people laugh, and they should probably get more Oscars, um, because it's harder to make people feel good than it is to. They're so much closer to being depressed than they are to being
That's
happy.
really
So
fascinating.
yeah, I think really well written happy songs are like masterpieces, but we
Hmm.
don't think of those as much. Like I think about songs like God Bless the Broken Road or Please Remember Me that Tim McGraw cut, or One of These Days that Tim McGraw cut, which my friend Kip and Marcus Hammond wrote. And more, just more songs like that
Sure.
you think of as like great songs. But as I mentioned, All About That Bass is a great song. Single Ladies is a
Sure.
great song.
Yeah.
Like Bruno Mars is needed on the planet. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. No, that's super interesting, and it's funny how we all. Yeah, I feel like we're kind of hardwired to go down that negative route, and it's constantly, at least myself, trying to bring myself to the positive. But it's true. Like it's when we think about big songs or hit songs or great songs, we so often think of like the sad songs or the heartfelt songs,
yeah,
but it's not usually like, well, life is good kind of thing. Even if it is a phenomenal song.
yeah. What's the big Adele song? Hello from the Other
Yeah, oh,
Side.
I
What's
love
the
that song. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that one's hello. No, is
Hello.
it?
Yeah.
Is it hello? Well, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes when I think of hello, I think of Lionel Richie.
Yeah.
But yes, but that's an emotional,
Yeah.
like, and no doubt, like those are great songs. But
Sure.
I just, I for songwriters out there, like challenge yourself to
It's
write
harder to
something
write a
that
happier
feels
song.
good,
It actually is much harder because it's so easy not. I mean, it's hard. It's easy to be cliche in a sad song, but like, you know, it's so much easier to be cliche in a happy song. So when you write
Yeah.
actually a good happy song, it's actually you're right. It's so much
Yeah.
harder. Absolutely.
Well, there's one for you, Happy,
Yeah.
Pharrell. Like,
Yeah.
what a great
Yeah.
song,
Exactly.
like I mean, that's such a standout song. Like,
Yeah.
people of all ages
Yeah.
relate to that. I saw the people in
It's
my
true.
hometown in the Teapot Parade were driving down the street, the Teapot Parade, doing a little dance to Happy. Like, I mean, it was a universal mega hit,
Sure.
you know?
Absolutely.
So,
That's amazing. I'm also curious now, in all the artists that you've met, for people that are starting out their careers or developing their careers, whatever stage they are in their career of the five different stages. I think that also that those five stages could apply to a lot of things actually, not just
mhm.
the arts and stuff, but even just in general. Like even as an entrepreneur, you have an idea, you're curious, then you make a commitment to that
That's
idea,
right.
then it takes courage to actually follow through with that idea. It's very interesting, those five C's. I think that that's a really interesting insight. But so depending on where people are and stuff, but I'm curious in what you've seen. You've met a lot of artists, and I'm curious what makes an artist stand out to you, or what makes an artist memorable to you.
Wow, what makes them memorable? I I personally, um, I'm drawn to something that I knew I didn't have, and that makes people really stand out to me. And what I mean is, like, I told you a little bit about being a singer, and I kind of felt like maybe I needed to do some personal work, but like I felt like I wasn't good enough to be in the front of the stage. I really didn't want to be, really. Like, my personality works much better
Hmm.
in the background,
Sure.
but the times that I was at the front of the stage, I didn't feel like I held people's attention in a unique way. So when I see that in somebody else, that performance, that like very like free, very much aligned thing, that is really what I look for.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting. I was just like 2 hours ago talking about this with my vocal coach, and just an aspect of like how some artists are just great entertainers, and like what that means, and keeping people's engagement, and that also leads to you believing what they're saying. Like if they're like really drawing you in, as opposed to somebody, which there's nothing wrong with, but it's a very bit different experience for a listener or a viewer when you're really like an entertaining artist versus one that's singing their acoustic guitar, just singing to mic. Both are respectable in both aspects, but there's something unique about each of those for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's bigger than that, um, because, somebody like James Taylor
Sure.
or, somebody like
That's a
that can
great point.
just come out and I think honestly it's they're so used to just having this gift come through them, and it's not always the best singer. Like, what is the best singer? The best singer is somebody that like just communicates. Like, I used to, again, with that example of like, the more I know, I think I need more. Then I loved Van Morrison. Why did I love Van Morrison? Because he was so free.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you saw him sing, he just looked, he didn't care how his body moved or whatever. And then just soul came out. And so that, you know, I, that's something that the best person in your choir from high school probably didn't have. But
Very
they're a
true.
good singer, good singer. I saw hundreds of kids, probably thousands, come up during American Idol auditions,
Hmm.
and so many of them were really good, and they didn't stand out.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes a person stand out is just their whole vibe,
Sure.
and the way that they are just have a unique way that they sang, and they weren't like trying to sing Jesus Take the Wheel perfectly like Carrie Underwood.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's it for
No, that's
me.
super interesting. And to some degree, I feel like technique can be taught, where like that vibe is more about just being true to yourself, um, and that is a lot more. Being true to yourself is a lot harder than just going to vocal lessons for 3 years and getting a really good voice.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. But it's just, I mean, then there's a whole other level, really, because a few years ago, there's a great theater here called the Belcourt, and it's in the middle of Hillsborough Village, and they show a lot of like indie films and things you don't see at AMC or whatever. But they had this Saturday matinee for like a month of they showed widescreen musicals, and I love musicals. But most of the movies I had never seen the original West Side Story and all these things. So I went to that, and I went to see Funny Girl, which starred Barbara Streisand. I know Barbara Streisand. Like, I mean, I know who she is. I don't know her, but I so I just, got my popcorn and everything, and I'm sitting there. Well, the opening scene of that movie, you see the back of Barbara Streisand in like this fur with this fur hat, and these you hear these hills clicking. I've only seen it once, so forgive me if this is what I remember. So she's walking into this theater on Broadway. You just see the back of her, and then she passes by this mirror and turns to it, and that's the famous line, like "Hello, gorgeous," or however she says it, which I had heard before, but when I saw that on that big screen and saw like Barbara Streisand for the first time, I got like full body
Mm-hmm.
chills.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there are some people that are on a whole different level
Mm-hmm.
and it's like maybe like 10 people that are alive today that have that kind of
Mm-hmm.
power. And she hadn't even sung yet. She just
Hmm.
said, "Hello, gorgeous." And she
Yeah,
had the charisma was off the charts.
sure.
So,
No, it's super interesting. I definitely know what you mean, and yeah, I mean, there's so many artists out there that maybe aren't the most quote unquote talented, but or let me phrase that, technically talented. You know what I mean? Like their voices are a little strange, or they're not perfectly in key, or but they are phenomenal songwriters. And they're great at making you feel something.
yeah.
Yeah, it's super
Hey,
interesting.
there's a reason why the Bluebird is one of the biggest venues in the world because people want to hear songwriters sing their songs. Are all songwriters great singers? No, they're not. But there's something about a person singing their own words. I think it mixes all the things we've been talking about, the vulnerability, the
Mm,
craft of songwriting, the performance. Like it's, people come from all over the world to sit in that small room and see the back of at least one person's head because they're in the round and listen to these songs,
yeah,
So
absolutely. No, it's phenomenal. I think that we covered so many different things today, and
yeah,
I
we have. We've been
appreciate.
all over the
No,
place.
but it's
So
good though, because I mean, there's so many different facets to the music
yeah.
industry and the arts and being a creative in general. So I really want to say thank you and I appreciate your time. So for everybody that is watching, definitely is also interested, definitely go check out the 5 day workshop coming up on March 14th. But if you could hang out for 30
Yeah.
more seconds, I want to say thank you so much to every single person that watched this. I really appreciate you guys. And definitely go check out LeAnn and all that she's up to. She's up to plenty of things. And even what she's up to currently, based on your track record, I have a feeling you have a lot more things in store in your future. So thank you guys
Thank you,
so much for
Jacob.
watching. I appreciate you, LeAnn, and I'll see you guys in the next video. God bless and peace out.
Thanks, everybody.